Welcome back. Today, we are going to be talking about midnight raids. Talk a lot about, in the 50s, post-World War II, 50s to 60s and on, was the civil rights movement, and there were so many things happening, so much organizing around the country. So after World War II, the amount of unmarried and divorced women who were on ADC grew, and so did the amount of African American women. And one thing I wanted to mention here is something that is rarely discussed, which is the reverse freedom rides. I don't know if people have heard about this, but basically anti-desegregationist or segregationist people upholding white supremacy in the South were sending people on buses under the impression that they'd be getting help from the president, housing, employment, right? So they were literally putting Black people on buses under this guise of assistance. An NPR article that I highly recommend. Southern segregationists who were still furious over the school desegregation fights that dominated the 1950s saw them freedom riders, which was a group of interracial people who were going throughout states and cities on buses to fight for integration. Anyway, saw the freedom riders as sanctimonious provocateurs under this local group called Citizens Council, which was basically like the KKK, but not the KKK. They're sending people to the north. And let's see, I want to pick a specific quote. It says, from Clive Webb, who was a historian, he says, they targeted people who were either welfare recipients or prison inmates, said Webb, people who were placing a burden as they saw it on public resources. So this rhetoric has been around for decades. So, the Citizens Council were trying to send people to New York, New Hampshire, Indiana, Idaho, Minnesota, California, and elsewhere, as it says in this article, which I will show you. And so all of this was happening at the time. There was also a lot of protests and organizing happening in California specifically. The Black Panther Party was not founded until like the mid-60s, I believe. But even before then, there were organizations of Black people or coalitions of Black people organizing, right, on campuses, in the streets, etc., because there was so much pushback against integration, right, against the civil rights movement. And so I'm reading Karen Gustafson, who wrote Cheating Welfare. I don't have the book with me because it's in storage, but I am reading one of her articles again. And she is talking about how in the 1960, 1961 years, welfare offices started to adopt suitable home requirements and suitable parent rules, right? And so these were ways to exclude African American women from benefits programs because, again, we were starting to see more low-income women, low-income Black women trying to get benefits, right? And so it says in 1961, there was a rule issued by the Secretary of Health, Education, and Welfare barring the arbitrary application of suitable home requirements. However, they still had these men in the house rules, right, where they were targeting women who were not married but had a man in the home, meaning that the man was the provider, so they didn't need benefits, right? These suitable home requirements spurred midnight raids, welfare raids, bed checks. In California, it was called Operation Weekend, basically, where they would literally go to the homes of people on welfare, mostly low-income women, between hours of like 5:30, 6:30 to like 10:30, right? Banging on the door saying, hey, we need your consent to come into your home, make sure there's no man in here. They would go through people's clothes, the washer, the dryer, check under the bed for any traces of a man. And they were like, you can see this in the case Parrish versus Civil let me look it up. Parrish versus a Civil Service Commission, where Parrish was I believe he was a blind or he had a vision disability and was a social worker. And when the Board of Supervisors in Alameda County was like, y'all need to go out and do these raids, he was like, I'm not doing that. That's against the Fourth Amendment. That would make me an accessory. I'm not doing that. They fired him and he fought it for years, went up to the Supreme Court, and they were like, oh, snap. It is against the Fourth Amendment. Or then they were just able to come in the San Diego Law Review. I believe Sachs wrote this. He says, Parrish raids were designed for the purpose of detecting the presence of unauthorized means. The criminal charge to which the court alludes would be grand theft. Yet the presence of a man in a welfare recipient's home is not conclusive proof that the recipient is guilty of that crime. Criminalizing the poor. We talk about consent. So even though social workers needed to get consent from the person to do the raid, the argument was that the authority of power overrides the fact that this is like a voluntary consent. In this law review, it says, turning to another aspect of Parrish, the county contended that the searches took place pursuant to effective consent freely and voluntarily given. Since welfare authorities customarily request permission to enter a recipient's dwelling, the consent obtained is vitiated by virtue of the official's position. Parrish warrants this conclusion because the customary practice in Alameda County was to terminate welfare benefits for a reported refusal of entry. Arguably, the amorphous threat of authority coupled with a request for entry under the auspices of welfare search may render a consent ineffective due to recipient's awareness of the welfare official's virtual unlimited power over his very livelihood. From my dissertation, even in 2020, in Los Angeles, the civil grand jury report on DCFS referred to single mothers having a non-marital relationship as the mother-live-in-boyfriend red flag dynamic. In the report, the grand jury claimed that they found child fatalities to occur in homes where mothers had boyfriends living with them. Correlation is not causation. This was based off of little evidence. DCFS, though, agreed with the grand jury that they should implement training and providing parenting skills to mothers so that they could better understand and address this red flag dynamic. I have a lot that I said there in my dissertation. It's just a reminder that we need to know our history. The more we know, the more we are equipped with plans, ways to organize against it. Also social workers. Parrish lost his job and he fought tooth and nail. He stood on business. He stood on business, and we need to stand on business, okay? We cannot just go along with the status quo because, you know, they can't keep getting away with this, guys. They can't. So I hope you learned something. I hope you looked some stuff up. And yeah, thanks for watching.